So this research is based on the latest report, which is on the right-hand side, T-shaped teams, organizing to adopt AI and big data in investment firms. But the concept, some of the basic concepts were first mentioned in the two reports on the left-hand side. Not sure if any of you have come across those reports. Both of those were published in 2019. The first one was published in the summer of 2019, the second one in the fall. I think in both reports, we touched on this T-shaped team concept. Sorry, so what is the transition, from the first two reports and from AI pioneers to this latest report? So it's really from conviction to action, as we would refer to it. Because the AI Pioneers report was about building conviction in AI and big data by sharing examples of how these pioneers have been making use of AI and big data in their work. So we went to three continents, being Asia, Europe, and North America. And we went to 4 business lines: stocks, bonds, asset allocation, and hedge funds. So it's kind of like a 3x4 matrix. So we're using that 3x4 matrix to look for examples of what people in your region, in your peers, in your line of work are doing with AI and big data. So that the point of that was to convince people, you can use AI and big data productively. And I think we've done that well. So, since the publication of that report, the question that we tend to get have changed to not about what AI can do for me, but where do I begin? So not being consulting firms and not knowing, each firm and each individual's background, it's very difficult to answer that question. So we said we wanted to give people a framework, a way to think about this, give them a way to think about how they build their own roadmap. And so how to, so they can go from conviction to action. So there are two things that we think we can help people with. The first is this T-shaped team report, which is action 1. People need to go and build this organization, because we need a special or different organization from what we have today to adopt AI and big data. And 2 is we want to offer people a manual of options in terms of the applications they can develop. This is purely investment based. So if you're a financial institution, a lot of that won't apply to you, but for investment firms, a lot of it will apply. So this is really done more specifically for the investment professionals. But the T-shaped team part is an organizational principle. I think it applies to a lot of financial institutions as well. So that's kind of the purpose of our work. So this report was just published. The next one, the handbook, which is about the manual of options on applications, will be published next year. We're working on it right now. So today we'll go through 3 sections somewhat quickly so we can spend most of our time in Q&A. I think the point of doing these is really to make them relevant for you. And the best way to do that is by answering your questions. So I would invite you to submit your questions even now, to in the Q&A, using the Q&A button. So if Kamara sees questions that are interesting that we should answer, he'll stop me, and if I get to see them, I'll stop in and maybe address that as well. So we'll still save an hour in the end to answer your questions, but do feel free to send them our way as we go along as well. So we'll talk about 3 things: is how this T-shaped team concept came along, and 2 is what are the processes that we need, right? So the T-shaped team framework basically includes 2 parts. The first part is organization, and the second part is process. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about the 3 stages of AI and big data adoption. This is chapters 2, 3, 4 in the report. And in each report, we gave an example, a case study of how people are using this T-shaped team approach to adopt AI and big data. But the 3 stages are very distinctly different. They're unique characteristics. So we wanted to walk you through them so you know what to keep an eye out for when you actually do this. So, organization. So there are 3 reasons why this is called a T-shaped team. Because it doesn't have to be called this name, but we thought that, there are 3 reasons that's a good enough place to start. We couldn't think of a better one. And you can tell me whether that makes sense to you or not. There are two reasons you can see on this chart already is that we think the future investment teams will have three functions. They will not only have an investment function, they will also have a technology function, and they need to be working closely together. So we drew them in this perpendicular fashion for the reason that we want to speak to the technology folks, because in scientific terms, this is orthogonal. These two matrices are orthogonal. When they're orthogonal, it means they're statistically independent, which is kind of like the investment people and the technology people. We're kind of a very different people. We're not related. We don't understand each other. And that's the first reason we call this a T-shaped team, because it's made up of two very different types of people. People that don't understand each other. And the second T is this little green area we call the innovation function. Because the investment and technology are so different, we think we need to insert this small t into the structure to connect the two functions. So there's a small t in there. So that's the second reason why it's a T-shaped team. So the innovation function, their job is really just to make sure the other two functions talk to each other and collaborate and focus on the most appropriate work. The most appropriate work being the AI and big data applications that address critical investment problems, but also can actually be done with by the technology team, with a feasible solution. So they need to come up with possible technology solutions. So the technology function I want to mention is not the IT function that we already have at financial institutions today. We're specifically talking about data scientists and applications engineers, et cetera, that focus on this AI and big data applications. So the third T is this, right? This speaks to more the investment people or business people, because we always been trained to think in in terms of T-shaped skills. We want to be specialists in one area, but want to be generalists in many other areas so we can work with other people. That, I think, remains true, but it becomes challenging in this AI and big data adoption context. Why? Because AI and big data are so dramatically different from what we have been used to doing. We haven't been trained in doing this at all. Because if you're at a financial institution, if you're at an investment firm, you've probably been criticized for not being able to work with your marketing colleagues. But at least for marketing colleagues, you probably went to the same college, the same type of college, same colleges or the same business schools, et cetera. You got very similar training, all around the world, the business schools teach very similar things. So, but this time around, the technology folks bring some things, very uniquely different. So you actually studied under very different professors. You probably have very little in common. You don't do a lot of the things similarly. So that's the third T is we don't think there are enough T-shaped skills folks that can do this. So for AI and big data adoption, the institutions need to build these T-shaped teams, meaning finding specialists. Because technology is so complicated, the investment is also complicated. So you have specialists. A bond specialist today may not know bond stocks, right? Because that's sort of investment. And same with AI and big data. But to connect these specialists, you need people with T-shaped skills still, and they're in the innovation function. But for this whole thing to work, you need to have this T-shaped team now, instead of just the T-shaped individuals that you had before, individuals with T-shaped skills before. So who are these people in the innovation function? So I think the important thing to know is they have a 50-50 split, ideally, between business and technology. They need to know business, they need to know technology. It's very important they are fluent in both languages so they can be the translator. And they also have credibility with both sides that way. because otherwise an investment person with no programming or AI background, you have no credibility with the AI scientists and engineers. So it's very difficult to have that conversation, to identify the areas where you want to solve problems, but using what type of technology, et cetera. But on top of that, I think you start with someone who has a good background in both areas. But the other thing they need to do, they sort of I think it's important to be able to do strategic planning, meaning they need to know what are the critical areas, and also they know what are the right. They have a sense, what might be the good technology solution. And project management, you need to keep things on track. And I think it's important to have these project management skills. I think a lot of the time, surprisingly, people don't have that. And communication, we already mentioned, right? You kind of need that to begin with. So what about the investment function? This is kind of where we were talking about, whether you want to study a CFA, you want to study for like a data scientist a specialty. So data science is becoming something that's so complicated. That's why we, in the last option for the second polling question, we gave you our sort of understanding of what it takes to lead data science projects today. So there are two criteria, basically. One is course construction in instruction, they take enough courses, and two is work experience. So on the course side, it looks like you would need 10 to 15 undergrad and master level programming and AI type of courses. So that's fairly significant. If you think about it, these are very sort of intense classes. You can probably take one semester, and if you take 15, that's about 4 years, right? So, and then on the experience side, I think ideally you should have 3 to 5 years of work experience, but on the T-shaped teams, that's the tough part. There are not that many T-shaped teams around, so very few people would have that experience. So in reality, you see people, have a trade-off. You may not need both at that level, but you need a combination of that in some combinations of two sets of skills. So most people may not be able to do that. So for the investment people who cannot do that, what do? I think the minimum is what we have here. These are the things I think investment folks need to do. You can't do probably that. A lot of people cannot. I know I cannot. But for those people that cannot do that, these are the two things I think you should commit to. It is one, don't be apprehensive about this new trend coming. Don't sort of hesitate to work with the AI and big data scientists that come onto your floor and started working with you. They're not there to take your job. I think we've studied this question long and hard, and we talked to a lot of people. And I think the general conclusion is, at least as far as we can see, this investment business will remain this AI plus HI, meaning human intelligence. We've seen the answer from the other side. Data scientists tell us that, and we've seen obviously convictions from the investment side. People think you can't do this without us, and that's probably not wrong. But if you don't embrace those, and your competitor does embrace this, it's like they would have a digital assistant that can actually enable them to do a lot more effectively compared to you. And then you will lose an edge. So it's important to have this other part, is to have the strong sense of curiosity. Always think about how you can improve your investment process and how you can use AI to help. So these are the important things. If you can't do Python, machine learning on your own, I think that's not the end of the world. You can focus on being a good investment professional, but you need to have these two things. On the technology side, do they need to, know a lot of investment? I think it depends. I think there are two types of people that we're looking at here. This corresponds to the 3 stages of the adoption journey. I think at the early stage of adoption, particularly at a fundamental shop, if your business processes are complicated, for financial institutions, it's probably important to understand the business. And so you need on-the-job training of your own people. So these technology function is sort of not that dramatically different from the folks that you would get. But as you move along, as you get to more advanced stages, you will hire some people very special. We've seen people in advanced stages, even with a large number of PhDs, with STEM degrees from top universities, they will still hire machine learning specialists, for example. They go out of the industry to hire people with machine learning skills, with data science skills, because at that level, the expertise you need is, usually does not come in from within your team. You have to go out and get that expertise because they are special. This goes back to our discussion that to lead the data science project, you need this. But when you get to an advanced stage, you need a lot more than that even. So I think that's sort of when you need to go out to find the right people. So I think we're not the only ones talking about this, but the industry is slightly, I think, behind us in a lot of ways on average in talking about this. But you gradually seeing other people. We wrote about this a while ago, but you gradually start seeing people reflect on this in other surveys. So lots of people in the industry are starting to think about this. And as people start their adoption journey, they inevitably will run into these issues. So a couple of years into this, they absolutely would think about this. So the reason that we wanted to go out and talk to people about this now is so that you don't have to do that. You don't have to spend 2 years figuring this out. You kind of know what you're getting into and you prepare yourself for it. So you save yourself a lot of time. But otherwise, if you get into this business, you eventually will learn this. I think there is probably no other way around. So processes, I think this is more for the senior executives. So processes, this is sort of a management science topic. There are two ways of communication. One is codification, simple enough. You can codify and pass on that to people. Say, well, 1, 2, 3, you go do that. This is how you do it. But there are complicated topics. There are personalization. You need personalization in your communication. We think AI and big data adoption fall in the second degree. And that's a topic that's very relevant in today's world because the pandemic, because working from home, et cetera, you actually don't see your colleagues as often and you have to communicate online. For the simple tasks, codification type of communication, that's if sufficient, then that's fine. For complicated tasks, I think it gets actually, it's a hurdle, it becomes an actual hurdle. So this is kind of the one of the case studies that we've, for the intermediate stage in the report. And this is how they laid out this beehive map. So they put their innovation function in the middle, and this is how they do it. And the different product lines sit around it. So this is kind of their floor map. This is not an organization chart, but this is kind of like a floor map. It's just to show people see co-location as being a very important element of this. You do this, you become more successful. The ones that don't do this, you hopefully eventually will find out, that you need to do this. You need to have these interactions. So the other thing important in terms of processes is that you need to have these iterations or regular reviews, because you can't wait until, say, 6 months and we show you something and it doesn't work. That happens a lot with IT projects. So you need to have these regular reviews. So you're constantly updating people. This is where we are today, and this is what you wanted. So if people say, no, this is not what we wanted, you have time to adjust. A lot of times, by the time if you get to 6 months without talking to each other, it's too late, right? Because the project could have shifted a lot, a lot of times as well. So by the time you deliver something, they have moved on. They're looking for something else. So this constant communication is important. The other thing that we cannot overemphasize is this team versus function. I think we've always been operating in a way that we operate in functions, we get evaluated by functions. But as an institution, if you're the CEO, you really don't have functional goals. You have these a strategic objective that you want to achieve. A lot of times that requires the collaboration across functions. So you would establish these teams, cross-functional teams to work on those initiatives. And that's sort of the appropriate structure for AI and big data adoption. Because you look at that T-shaped team structure, you need people from different functions already, and they need to work closely together. So you can't use that old functional structure to restrict their creativity. You really need to change to this team organizational approach and culture. So the team structure will help you break down silos and align incentives and all that. So read the report. There are a lot more details in the report and in the case studies in the report. So the other thing we want to talk about is evaluation is important. One question we get is how do you actually make sure AI is adding value? Evaluation is hard, but always try to find creative ways to capture the changes you've made and the results you've been able to get. That's very important to communicate to your stakeholders that things are happening with this. So people always have questions. This thing they cannot see, they would always wonder if it's helpful. So they would actually do that. So that's 1 and 2. Do please ask questions as appropriate. Otherwise, I'll go on to talk about the 3 stages, and then we'll start.
I just want to highlight one observation, especially based on the second poll. That for managers or for C-level individuals on this call, even I'm sure there are a lot of initiatives out there to break out of the mold and come up with new areas. Be it, as you said, the personalization factors that we need to push, client segmentation, client insights, or even more specifically things like credit scoring models or model validation using AI. These are all things that are hard actually to find the skill set. And the results of the second poll show that even in this crowd, the amount of investment going to build out that resource is not that much. Everybody's there's only like a 5% investing time on learning Python and learning the AI factors. And that's a challenge. I'm just wondering if there are any participants here who have any questions or think that's a challenge that they face right now. Finding people. I know in my teams, I find that a challenge, getting the people with the right skill sets. There's a lot of projects that we need to run, but we don't have the people. We don't have the right proper structuring of the T-shape. And if we do find people who have the skill sets in both those areas, that's like a 1%. While you need at least 20% of the team who have that skill sets in both areas.
Absolutely. I think we'd love to see people's questions, and before we go on to the last section of the report. So do feel free to send them in. But otherwise, keep thinking about your questions. I'll go on to the last section. So the last section is about we're back here. It's about the 3 stages, right? Because there's an early stage and there's a intermediate stage, and then there's an advanced stage, and there are different stages, and then your focus would be different as you go along. So at the early stage, what is an early stage? Early stage is not a bad thing. Early stage is stage 1. I think being in stage 1 is a good thing. The bad thing is you're in stage 0 when you have where you're nowhere. You haven't done this. Early stage meaning you have started this already. So you have senior management support, and you have a holistic AI and big data adoption strategy, and you have started building a T-shaped team. So this is kind of what defines an early stage. Early stage meaning you're on track. So I think a lot of firms today are still in stage 0, and those are the ones that we worry about. So what are the things that early stage firms should focus on? So we think they should focus on continue to build these T-shaped teams, develop a supporting process, etc., and find and score quick wins. That's sort of the important thing. You have this management support, your boss is on your side, your boss agrees that you have this people and resources, etc., and the boss said AI and big data is important, we want to go down that road. So you build a T-shaped team, you develop these processes, but the key is you had to find something that convince people, especially the people from the, whose day job was doing this business or investment, etc. It's important for the technology folks and the innovation function to find something that actually works for the investment folks or the business folks, deliver value, but without a lot of their input. Just imagine, these people are naturally going to be skeptical, right? They're trained to be skeptical. They don't know who you are, what you do. So it's important to be able to find these quick wins. So to convince them that this stuff can actually be of help. Check out that case in our report. That's indeed how they happen. Because it's in that stage, you need to convince people that this is something that's actually helpful to them. You're not trying to take over their job. You're making their life easy. You're helping them to get better results. For a portfolio manager, if you can help them improve returns, reduce risk, and for a bank manager, if you can help them lower that default rate of their loans, etc. These are the things that you want to do. You help them do their better job. They get all the credit too, right? So the team gets the credit, but they obviously get the credit because at the end of the day, they're responsible for doing a good job in terms of business. So what makes an intermediate stage? What characterizes that you got into the intermediate stage? Intermediate stage meaning you basically have more capable teams than when you're early in the early stage, and your project selection process is already in place. So you know how to pick the right projects already. You have more experiences. You don't have to really focus on the quick win type of thing anymore. You would want to focus on something that makes the most sense, both from an investment and technology perspective. But that's because you have delivered some successful projects already. So you have that credibility, then you can do that, right? So you can move on. So your focus now is to continue to build out the team, because without people, you can't do this job. So the job is to continue to build out the team, to continue to improve the processes, right? Because when you're first out of the door, you have very simple processes, but you want to make sure now you have comprehensive, more sophisticated processes. And you look at the cases that we have in the report, the intermediate stage, their processes are fairly elaborate, right? And also in this stage, you need to figure out how to juggle multiple projects, because that's a good problem to have, but you need to be able to figure out how to do that. So what is an advanced stage? And an advanced stage is where AI and big data technologies are sort of integrated in many functions in your business. And so the structures and processes, surprisingly, by now are not important anymore, because we talk about all this organization, structure, and process. But if you get to the advanced stage, these things are not important anymore. Why? Because they are part of your DNA by now. Because you develop these processes, you work with them, you're used to it. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to make an emphasis on it. You again focus on your day-to-day job now, compared to where you were in the early and intermediate stage. Those things are second nature to you now. But talent remains important. So when you want to get to the advanced stage, you really need to have the right people, who can play at that level. So you basically need everybody on that team to be better investors, better data scientists, and better innovation function leaders for your T-shaped team to really shine. So the focus, as we said, you want all members to operate at the highest level and really deliver solid results. This is the end goal. The end goal is for you to be able to do your business better, but you need to go through all this process to get there. So that's sort of a long winding road. So we had a case study. So we'll probably not spend a lot of time on it. We'd rather answer your questions, but we can go through this as well if you would like. So we can do it either way. So the case study is for the early stage, from the early stage chapter. So this is a Singapore-based asset manager, 27 billion US dollars. And so they've started on this journey and they've done a good job. But I guess I want to pause first and answer any questions.
There is one question on machine learning, market manipulation. I guess it's something more for regulators. Any insights that you have there? Any experience on some of the data points you have there?
I think this is sort of algo and regulations. There are position papers on that. So I think algo trading, etc., are definitely fall into the regulatory perspective. Machine learning, how does that change the picture? I think that's sort of an important angle for us. Does machine learning make sort of the improve the make the risk higher? My sense is that it does not necessarily make the risk higher because it offers one different alternative. So the methodologies could be different. And so you would actually supposedly have people offsetting their trades in that process, etc. So the risk is not higher. But algo and the regulation, etc., that angle, it's not changed by this dynamics. So machine learning doesn't change the regulation. The regulators still need to look at the algo traders and make sure they do all the right things. The machine learning, I don't think changed that dynamic, but I don't think it increases risk. I think it, in a way, kind of potentially can reduce the risk as well. So it's not one way.
And I mean, this topic keeps on coming up in a lot of our other webinars, and it just shows that the traditional forms of monitoring is too slow as we increasingly see increased volumes go through the exchange. We have to bank on newer technologies, smarter technologies, and I'm sure it's a priority for the regulator as well. It's having T-shaped teams, people who understand the dynamics of the market as well as the technologies is an important focus area, obviously, for them. So it's definitely an area that they will have to put more focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we get the question is who is this type of research for? Is it for investment professionals or for regulators? I think it's both. I think regulators need to know at least as much as the investment professionals know, so they know they can figure out how to regulate this business, right? So, but from a different angle, I think a lot of regulators, in particular in Asia Pacific, are more prone to sort of incentivize the industry to move in the right direction. So in that sense, we would love to see regulators to be promoting this type of structure, in their jurisdiction. I think it will be a help to the industry in their local jurisdiction if they get on this, correct path. So there are certainly many things that they can do. In that regard, we actually have collaborated with the regional regulatory authority, and we've done some research across the 6 major Asia Pacific financial centers. We've done some work for them, and they work with academics, and they have produced a report in collaboration with us on that. So that will be an extension of our research, particularly applied to their jurisdiction, in terms of policy recommendations. We think this is what required for the industry to move on. And they said they take that, as the input to their policies, and they develop some policy recommendations. That report has not come out yet. I think should be published later this month. So do please ping back, and we'll be talking about that report as well as it's released.
Just another question. I mean, we spoke about different companies at different stages of their life cycle of adoption, early stage, mid cycle, advanced. And you also spoke about a zero stage where nothing's happened. In our emerging market countries, understanding that the skill set dynamic might be a bit scarce.
Right.
What are kind of your implementation timelines for putting together a T-shaped team? Where do you find? I mean, what are the kind of bottlenecks, or what are the experiences?
Absolutely.
Other regions have had?
So I think the teams can be put together relatively quickly. I think getting the consensus, getting the organization buy-in may take a little time. The case of UOB Asset Management, we met when I was actually promoting the AI Pioneers report in Singapore, and we spoke a year later, and they made a lot of progress. Right, we knew they were going down the right path. We wanted to see a year later where they were, and they've actually already done a lot, and that's covered in more details in the report. So they've actually achieved, they've actually delivered a number of projects, etc. So I think the early stage for a lot of firms, if there is management support, if they have some people that can be reasonably ready for those different roles, then you can actually maybe use third-party technology solutions, etc., as a sort of in the beginning, and then get good results in a year or two. So that's kind of where we like this. Is if you've gone down the right path, you can see results pretty quickly. But if you've gone down the wrong path, you could also do a lot of harm, because people, if you fail, and people will say, "Oh, what happened?" This AI and big data thing, we never thought it would work. So the next round, when people come back and do this, they just face even a higher hurdle for convincing people to do this. So the human oversight, etc. I think obviously in the beginning you will need a lot of oversight, and even the technology folks would recommend that. That there's never. We're very far away from automated trading today, right? There are sort of end-to-end AI solutions, maybe somewhere in the world, but the vast majority, that we know are not end-to-end. So I think is that we're kind of quite far from there. So every step of the way, usually there's human oversight. So that's actually not something to worry about. And data comes from lots of sources. That's why this is called an AI and big data adoption, because AI needs data. And this is where sort of a larger markets would have an advantage. It's sort of for AI and big data have over smaller markets, because smaller markets, there's obviously less data, maybe less history, etc. So emerging markets and frontier markets, we're likely to be behind the curve a little bit in terms of AI and big data adoption. That in itself is not a disadvantage, because if you invest in your own markets, no one has more data. It's the same data. There's just not that much. So I think it sort of gives human an edge in those markets as well.
I think a couple other questions have come, but I think some of them might be answered by the example, the kind of case study that you were about to walk through. So maybe you can proceed.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about this case study a little bit. I think it's sort of an interesting case, really. So this is kind of the let's see. Right. So this is their T-shaped team. When we're not saying everybody should build the same T-shaped team, and we have a spec for specifically how many people, what type of training you need. We have a roadmap, a sort of a blueprint, but it's not precise. It's not something you can, actually, you really need to think about your own situation. It's a framework. It's something you can adapt. And this is how you be asset management. This is how they build their T-shaped team. Is the investment function is the same folks as before. So they had portfolio managers, they had analysts, etc. They have an innovation team, which is they call data and digitization. So digitization is usually where you begin, right? You make sure the data can be processed. So they have a team that actually operate as the conduit between the investment folks and technology solutions. And technology came from different sources for them, because UOB asset management, 27 billion, it sounds very big, but usually investment firms don't have a huge staff. So they basically work with their parent company's IT personnel in addition to their own personnel, and they also work with IT partners. I think this is very important for medium-sized and small-sized institutions. Is you can't afford to do everything on your own, so be ready to work with the partners. So what is the specific profiles for folks at UOB Asset Management? People in that innovation function role, in that data and digitization unit. So these are the two profiles. One is a CFA charter holder who has been a market maker in equities and futures, but went on to get a master's degree in information technology. So this is kind of how you get these cross-functional skills, right? I think that's one thing that's important to find these people. But also, one thing we see is that I don't think the industry today or the educational institutions today are particularly preparing people for that role, because we just identified that need. It wasn't very obvious to a lot of people before. And the second person is someone with a degree in economics, but so happened she worked in a company that where they use AI, etc. So she has gained some experience, during their working at the other company. So I think these are sort of very typical examples, is where people that end up in these innovation function roles got there more out of serendipity than strategic planning. So you can't plan for these. Nobody knew this was going to happen, but it's by demand. People naturally figure out you need people like that to be in the middle, to be actually helping with the communication, with the planning, etc. So this is kind of a more elaborately, explains the source of their technology. So one is, we said, they outsource, and that's the fintech companies. So they went for the fintech company that has proven solutions, but also can help deliver quick results. So this was related to what we said about the quick win. And the UOB Group Technology, so this is their parent company's IT personnel. And also UOB has a data management office, right? So I think they use that for help in their capability building, etc. So I think they work with all the relevant parts of the organization and outside of the organization, to find the right solution. This is an important lesson for a lot of folks. There's always that question: is do we build it ourselves, or do we get it from elsewhere? And usually, if you can get it from within your organization, all the better. But be prepared, to get it from elsewhere as well. If you're not that, you don't work for one of the, Fortune 500 companies that has all the resources and can do whatever they want to do. So this is the T-shaped team, particularly in that one project where they work with a fintech company called Value 3 Technology Solution. So, and then in that particular project, the data and digitization unit, again, operated as a digital translator. So they kind of, acted as a translator between the two functions. And they also manage the data governance, et cetera. So I think that is also an important role for this function, right? So, because this is kind of how they specifically happen. And the investment team, specifically in this one, are the PMs in the fixed income team, and also the risk analysts. So these are the specific application developed for these fixed income PM and risk analysts, and the solution was offered by the fintech company, but we need folks in the middle to connect the dots so this can happen efficiently and appropriately. So their key takeaways, they mentioned, they said change is never an easy process. I think that's sort of a good learning because they've done the right things. For a lot of people that didn't do the right thing, that will be a tougher learning. And this is strong will and mandate from upper management is needed. This is what the product team, wrote. So if they didn't have the product, senior management support, it's very difficult to succeed, right? We said you need to have quick wins to convince people, but you don't get the opportunity to convince people who has been doing that for all their lives. Basically, you're saying, oh, you need to do this. I think that's you need management support to get you into the door, but you need to deliver. So you can help management in that aspect. If you don't deliver, then management cannot help you, right? And they essentially decided that human intelligence is still very critical in the whole process, because AI and big data, all these applications are fairly basic, right? I think a lot of them are to help with information gathering, or if they help with decision making, it's with rules that you planned, right? They're implementing the rules you set up. So a lot of that I think is sort of a human intelligence driven. They will get smarter over time, but we're very far from that yet. And then they said constant training is key. It is to continuously upskill the staff. My interpretation of that last bit, the constant training, is not necessarily for everybody to learn Python and machine learning and you'll be able to work on projects. It is once you have some exposure to Python and machine learning, et cetera, you kind of appreciate what the other side is going through. It's not as easy, but it can be powerful. I think it gives you some perspectives. So then you will have the right attitude to believe in this AI plus HI methodology, but also be curious in terms of how AI and big data can help. So that constant training might be the mechanical approach to get you to where you want it to be. But if you are already there, I don't think necessarily it takes Python or machine learning training to get you there. So that's with the case. So with that, I think we're
one follow-up question that has come up is how do we set up leadership within those teams? As you said, the technology-focused individuals might have an AI edge, while the domain experts might have the human intelligence edge. So when you're structuring a team like that, that might be leading. The inception might be pushed from above, but you need to lead it.
Right.
In your experience, should the technology people be leading these initiatives, or should the domain people be leading them, or is that also depending on the
fantastic question? I think the answer to that is different in the 3 stages. That's why the early, intermediate, and advanced stage actually makes a difference. I think the people will spend the bulk of their time in the intermediate stage. I think for the lucky ones, if you can get to the intermediate stage, that will take longer to then you get through the early stage. A lot of them will probably not get to the early stage. A lot of them won't get through the intermediate stage. So I think that's sort of where where the innovation function plays the most important role. In the early days, though, I think it's on the technology folks almost, because there's a reason why people, when they first do these projects, they go get the entire technology folks. But having the innovation function folks then is also very helpful, because not because you don't want them, it's because you probably can't afford them or find them. If you can find them, I think they are on your side. You want them to be on your side, because then they can help you to convince the investment folks that this can help. To me, I think the best decision-making process, is when we said in the beginning, if you recall that chart, we said the innovation function people, what type of skill set we want them to have. We want them to be 50-50. I think all through three stages, you would want that process to be 50-50. Because the business function has a tendency to run these things. They want to decide, but they don't actually know the right answer, right? So I think that's the question. They can't actually, they don't know the technology. If they want to, they think they know the technology, things are even, you're in more trouble. So, but they know the problem they need to solve. That's the thing. So that you need to really sit together and say, this is my list of problems. What can you help me with? And then the technology folks to look at that list and say, these are the things we have experience in. We know we can deliver on that very quickly, very efficiently. I think at this juncture, it's important for the technology folks not to pick the projects that are too challenging, that they haven't done before. They have an idea they could do it, but they may not be able to. You want to focus on the things that you know you can 100%, 120%, you can deliver. And that's kind of the process. But having the innovation people, they are like guardrails and make sure you don't fall off the cliff. Right? So they can see both sides. So they can see whether the investment folks are throwing at you a list that's really important to the investment people, because the tech people won't know. But then they'll also be able to see whether the tech people, whether they're offering something valuable. Is this something that they can do? And also, is this something that makes sense, right? From a technology perspective. So it's always important to have them if you can. If you don't have them, the technology folks are important. At the early stage, you can't count too much on the investment or business people, because they won't be helpful to you, because they're very skeptical. Why do I invest time in this project? I don't know what you can deliver, but do something for me and then we'll talk. So I think the best decision making is 50-50, but you have to be practical in the beginning. So you had to gain credibility, right? So but even when you get to the advanced stage, you will still want the decision making to be 50-50. But by then, I think people are at a different skill level. I think these things come more naturally. You don't have that same level of resistance, and people generally understand both sides a lot more, have a lot more trust in each other. These are all very important things. I think this is a part of the cultural change. Not every firm can go through that, and we think the firm that cannot go through that, I think those are the ones we worry about.
Another aspect that's coming up is this only applicable to AI? I think having a T-shaped team.
That's our for this report. I think that's the intention. I think a lot of the things can be applied across the board, to cross-functional teams. But a lot of the other things are not so extreme. So you may not to go to the extreme to do this. For AI and big data, because they are a T. Most of the things in life where they're not a perfect T. But for investment people or business people and AI and data science people, it's probably a T. So that's why we need this. I think that's the reason we think this is so serious. I think finance and marketing people can generally learn to work together. It's not as hard, but business and AI and data science folks, I think we kind of need something new, something different.
And Larry, in some of the other firms that were under this study, how, as you said, the 50-50 people are a rare commodity. So most firms, as part of their longer run strategy, they might either, I mean, if they didn't have a budget, they'll stick a data science engineer in all their teams, and that person will be the 50-50 or will become the 50-50 person because they'll observe the domain.
Right. I think we're talking really about very ideal situation, desirable situation. But in reality, you find whoever you find, and as we said, no one is producing them as as the spec that we design. So, but hopefully there will be, down the road as we do this, and we'll catch more attention from the academia, from the industry, and people will design roles around these, and people will, train people around these, and then we'll have them. But for now, you get what you get, and you had to work with it. So I think it's just an ideal situation to be balanced. But if you're not so balanced, that's so be it. You still have to do stuff. But the important thing is we see folks that have these skills tend to rise to leadership positions, because you probably just help so much for you to do this. We've talked to folks who lead very large data science teams, and they would say, I'm the only person who knows business in our team. So I think these are important insights in a way that you can actually use to your advantage. So maybe we run the second poll again, and as we encourage folks to ask additional questions. Can we try the second polling again, just to see whether we've been moving people in the right direction? But I think 60% was a good starting point for people to say that we're investment people, we just want to focus on investment skills. I think that's kind of if you don't have a strong data science background, and if you think it will be challenging for you to learn this, I think that's perfectly understandable. I think that's a reasonable point, a starting point already. So, but on top of that, we want to see whether we've been able to change people's perspective. So, yeah, question number 2 again. I'll give you a couple of minutes maybe to see whether you think this is something that's how you wanted to pursue this.
And while people are responding to poll 2, please, if you have any other questions that you want Larry to take, please hive it up on the chat.
So it's higher. So you went from 60% to 68%. But I think we have a small number of people responding. So it's a little harder to tell whether it's the same people or not. But I think we have a few a slightly lower percentage. I've managed to convince the people not to take that 10 to 15 courses altogether. So I guess I've scared people away. So that's kind of maybe the point. But the point wasn't to scare everybody away. If you have a strong data science background already, and if you can do this, you'll be the most desirable talent in this market today. So it wasn't my intention to scare everybody away. But if you didn't come from a somewhat of a technical background, and if you cannot invest that much time in doing this, then you need to consider your effort and your goals. If your goal is to be able to lead these data science projects, but you can only invest in 300 hours, you're not going to get you there. You'll probably need to invest in, I don't know, 1,500 hours or something before you can get there. So that's our point. So it's not we didn't want to scare people away. So it wasn't the intention, but the intention is to have realistic expectations of your goal and the amount of time and effort that you can put into to pursue these goals.
I think the CFA syllabus also has changed and also has kind of moved a bit onto maybe not AI ML, but it made the first steps of moving towards slightly more technology focused.
Right. I think the CFA curriculum has added 3 different readings. So there is a general reading that was added for fintech in level 1. And then there are 2 readings added for level 2. One is about machine learning. One is about how to manage data science projects. So I think those are sort of a very quick way for a CFA curriculum to adapt to the changes in the industry. I think the industry tends to change slowly, so the program doesn't usually make dramatic changes to adapt. But this AI and big data development came on pretty strong, so I think we're making very quick adjustments as well. So so that's kind of how the process is going.
And I mean, I don't think you scare the people away, but I mean, it doesn't always mean that the hardcore person who spends 10 to 15 hours on an AI syllabus is the person who moves into that 50-50, a person who can straddle both those areas. It could be a person who has a good, strong understanding of the AI themes and practices, as well as is the CFA person who provides that 50-50.
That's sort of the profile we provided for the UOB asset management case, right? Because that's where they started, and that's good. But I think be prepared that you need to continue to upskill yourself as you progress, because by the time you get an intermediate stage, you will need more advanced skills. By the time you get to the advanced stage, you need even more advanced skills. So I think that's sort of a challenge that you need to see. It's a constant, the upgrade process. You need to continue to invest in this to be able to do this. I think it's both challenging and hopefully fun, because that's how you make sure that you and your organization will continue to be leading in this industry and not following. And that's kind of the goal of this report, is for people to come to realization, what the reality is, and then you make your best decision to adapt to that.
I think we're actually I mean, within time limits as well. So if there are any other questions, we can take any other questions. Another question that has come up is more of a localized question of, what are the factors that kind of constrain putting a team together in our emerging market setup? I mean, the background is, skill sets here are a bit hard to find. And as you said, you kind of make do with what you have. What is your advice to firms who want to kind of quickly set up T-shaped teams and try to take off?
Well, I think you find the person that's closest to your expectation, get things started, but either continue for them to get training, or you continue to look for people who are better trained. I think we've seen a lot of people who are, well, not a lot, we've seen occasional cases where people that don't meet our, the standards, the things we said, 10 to 15 courses and 3 to 5 years work experience. The people that are behind, below those levels lead these projects, and we've heard good things about it too. So we're at that early stage. So there are people who can deliver, who can perform. I'm sure these are very entrepreneurial sort of individuals, and also very has a good can learn quick on their feet, can learn these things very quickly. But I think that their challenge is to maintain, stay in that position, to continue to upgrade, because there may be a time, that if you don't continue to upgrade yourself, that you end up not being able to lead the team and the institution, to the next stage. But I think you just need to grow with the job. I think that will be the ideal situation. So it's sort of a tough thing, but doing something is always better than not doing something. And though you can learn as you do it, that's all the ideal situation. But at the same time, be aware, the challenges, the hurdles, they just didn't disappear. You deliver this project, and then you can always deliver on similar projects. People that are better prepared always have a higher probability of success.
That's pretty much all the questions that I think most of the other questions that have come up through the chat window were
That's good. That's great.
answered
I'm
from
happy
the
to.
example.
I think we can. Well, I'm happy to stay on, or we can close the session early, as you see appropriate, I guess.
One other thing that popped up is incentive structures for this sort of team. Now,
Right.
I think that falls along. I mean, I guess you mentioned at one point, these teams culturally, one part of the team will be different to the other.
That's right.
And so that is an important way to kind of fix and put together these things. Is there any, I guess there's no magic formula, but I mean, how would they kind of, I would imagine the AI people might be the junior people who join the team, while the seniors might be the business, domain experts.
I think, yeah,
might be the other way around.
You see these situations. It's sort of a challenge, that just complicates things even more, right? What if the innovation function person is younger and more junior? How do they lead this process? You just have to, that's why you need senior management support. Because if the senior management is not on your side, you can't do this. So, but also the folks, investment folks like myself who's been doing this a long time, we need to be open-minded, because if we don't embrace technology, we're apprehensive towards all these initiatives. We'll become sort of, we'll become outdated sooner than otherwise. If we can embrace technology, that's the best way for us to stay on and continue to do a good job. I think we just need to, just roll with the punches and be able to adapt. And this is part of that important process. And I don't, one of the things that if you go through this early, intermediate, and advanced stage, I think you should give the investment or business folks a sense of comfort, because if you can grow with this process, by the time it gets to the end, you realize, I think we're doing this whole thing for the purpose of improving business, improving investment performance. It helps you and your position versus your competitor, your position in the industry. And by the time you get to the end, you should be still feel like very much in charge. You're not going to be replaced, but you should just also be very comfortable working with your data science colleagues by then. So I think that's sort of the thing. You see these stories, you see these things play out. It's not like they come on, they replace you, and in a few years you're gone. You remain important. You could be even more important if you're successful. Gather more assets. You'll be competitive in the industry. So you actually do a better job. So I think that's sort of the perspective people should have. Really think about how this will evolve. It's not you competing with the machine. It's you and your digital assistant. Actually, you are working as a team to compete with your the other firm and their digital assistants. So you would want your digital assistant to be better than the other firms. So that's kind of the the process. You want them to be on your side. You want to have a good AI and data science team. So the new T-shaped team, you want to have good colleagues on all around. So
And speaking from, I mean, my experience, I mean, where I work, we have a lot of these. Essentially, what we're doing is trying to create that itself, a T-shaped team across borders, across different companies.
right.
So, I mean, I guess that's something that the firms are moving towards. So the early adopters, the quick wins. Sometimes they can either create that, the extra leverage through your own team or through an external party. But as you said, it's about creating that synergy, working with these different actors, but making use of this
that way, though, for sure.
Yeah.
I think in general, at the early stage, the teams are usually in one place. Even in the intermediate stage, the teams are also likely in one place, because there is a section in the chapter 3 where we talk about intermediate stage. We talk about the decisions to centralize or not centralize, because you start out early with a centralized technology function. At what point would you decide to say we want to place some AI scientists or engineers in each sort of a specific business units, instead of having them centralized, like in that beehive map, everybody sitting in the middle. So I think as your business grow, as your expertise grow, this will happen. So you will actually expand into other functions. You will expand into different geographies, but it complicates things. We talk about the importance of co-location, personalized communication, etc. So I think these need to be closely managed, right? So you can't really expect sending one person to a different country and then they'll be delivering the same at the same level as a centralized team. Exactly. So I think these are the things they're all learning by doing. It's not easy, but it's all part of the process. You start with a centralized team, but as you grow, you expand, and that's what happens. But at the end of the day, I think you're likely going to have a lot of decentralized teams too. So that's sort of a either or. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. But you can have all these decentralized teams in different countries or in different business sort of strategic teams, initiatives. So it depends on how these things evolve and how your business is evolving, etc. So it could be either way, but it's not an easy process to manage. I think it doesn't happen in the beginning because you only have so much talent. You focus on one project and then you're already together. But that's part of the growth process. You have to expect that.
So, final question: what would be your advice for firms? Definitely there is a dire need to create T-shaped teams. What would be your advice to all the people who want to create the teams here in our kind of local context?
Well, I think obviously big countries and big corporations have an advantage. They have the resources because if you one team, you have a lot more people to choose from. That's just a simple fact. But I think smaller countries and smaller organizations, if they realize this earlier, than some of the other people, because even today, not everybody is convinced AI and big data is an inevitable trend. A lot of people are not. And that's to your advantage if you realize it is. So if small firms that start early would have an advantage to those firms, bigger firms that are resisting the trend. So I think this is your chance. But I think small firms can either collaborate, or just work with sort of outside partners, etc. Right? I think the challenge once you end up working with external partners, and you realize, you want to decide whether I customize or not customize, whether they will let you customize or not let you customize. So these are all decisions that you need to have that roadmap. That's why we wrote about this early, intermediate, advanced stage. the longer planning you have, the easier transition that you will have. So I think these are all the important things to consider. So it's lots of details that you need to get right. But I think it doesn't mean small firms and small countries don't have a chance. I think if their management and then themselves are on board earlier, so that's the advantage. I think ultimately it's whoever delivers has the advantage, right? You have the resources doesn't mean you can deliver. Not having the resources itself is a disadvantage, but if you have the vision, you're ahead of a lot of people. So I think that's sort of hopefully people can leverage the research and do some good, but also be realistic, because this is a very significant undertaking. It's not maybe something that you can do purely on your own. You may want to collaborate with, like-minded people, want to collaborate to a certain extent, but you also may want to think about how you want to customize so you can still have an edge in that process. Because the investment is important to have an edge. Banking, maybe less so, but banking, you would also want to have an edge. You would not have a lower default rate, higher, growth, et cetera. And for all those, you may need to have a combination of skill sets. So I think it's really to have this right framework to think about things, adapt it to your situation, and play it to the best of your strengths.
I think we can. That's pretty much all the questions that we've answered everything that's come up, and I think we've given quite a lot of ideas to think and mull over. There's been a couple of excellent examples Larry has pushed across and answered some excellent questions as well. I would like to thank Larry for his time, for walking us through the concept of T-shaped teams, as well as all the practical examples that he showcased with us. And I know that there are a lot of other practical examples that Larry has. So, please feel free to reach out to Larry for any other questions that you might have. With that, I would like to wind up the session today. Thank you all for joining. And thank you, Larry, again, for your time.
Great. Thank you, Kamara. And thanks all for joining. Thank you.